no one at the Brighton School of Music paid much attention to the new administrative assistant. Emma wore quiet shoes, a plain navy dress, and always had her chestnut hair tied in a low braid. She filed paperwork, made coffee, and rearranged sheet music, all without a sound. To the faculty, she was just another face in the background. Someone to bark orders at when printers jammed or when recital programs needed fixing. "Miss, this is alphabetical, not by composer," snapped Dr. Karen Blake, head of piano studies, barely glancing up from her clipboard. "Yes, Dr. Blake, I'll fix it," Emma replied softly, adjusting the stack with steady hands. She never corrected them, never hinted at who she used to be. But that changed on the day of the scholarship concert, when their star student collapsed minutes before showtime. Panic spread backstage, no backup, no performance, and a $2 million donor sitting front row. Then Emma stepped forward. "I can play the list transcription," she said quietly. A moment of stunned silence. This wasn't part of the plan. But what no one knew, what they were about to find out, was that Emma wasn't just an assistant. She was a legend, in hiding. Part 1. The woman no one noticed. At the Brighton School of Music, the hallways echoed with arpeggios and ambition. Talented students rushed between master classes and practice rooms, their instrument cases slung over shoulders like badges of honor. Faculty members, most with doctorates and egos to match, walked with clipped strides and rarely looked down, especially not at Emma. Emma Callahan, the new administrative assistant, had been with the conservatory for just over a month. She showed up every day before sunrise, brewed the staff's coffee, made sure the copiers were stocked with paper, and silently handled the endless stream of emails, forms, and recital logistics. She was efficient, polite, invisible. "Miss Callahan, this should be alphabetized by last name, not by genre," snapped Dr. Karen Blake, head of piano studies, one morning as she dumped a folder of sheet music on Emma's desk. Her voice was as cold as the steel bracelets she always wore. "I'm sorry, Dr. Blake, I'll fix it right away," Emma replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Blake didn't acknowledge her apology. She simply pivoted on her heels and disappeared down the corridor, heels clicking in a rhythm that echoed her impatience. No one thanked Emma, no one asked how she was doing. To them, she was a fixture, like the printer or the hallway lights. Functional, replaceable, and certainly not worthy of professional respect. She didn't fight it. She didn't correct them when they mispronounced her name or assumed she had no musical background. She simply worked, quietly and diligently, with a grace that went unnoticed by those too proud or too preoccupied to look beneath the surface. But behind Emma's calm eyes and composed smile was a soul that had once stood beneath the stage lights of Carnegie Hall. That part of her life was gone now. She'd let it go, or at least tried to. The accident, the recovery, the years of silence, all of it had chipped away at her identity until she wasn't sure what remained. She wasn't here for recognition. She wasn't even sure she belonged in the music world anymore. Still, every day she touched the instruments, dusted them, polished the pedals, straightened music stands. Something stirred in her, like a melody that refused to fade. And yet, time and again, she was met with dismissive glances, sarcastic comments, and thinly veiled contempt. "Did you even go to college?" one of the junior faculty members had asked once, chuckling as he passed her in the staff room. Emma hadn't answered. She didn't have to. She'd gone to Juilliard. She'd toured with the Boston Symphony. She'd once been called the future of American classical music. But none of that mattered here. Not now. Not in this role. Not to them. And maybe that was why it stung so deeply. It wasn't just that they didn't see her. It was that they chose not to. They saw a woman in a cardigan with a name badge. They never saw the legend hiding underneath. Part 2. A voice ignored. Emma didn't mind hard work. She'd never been afraid of long hours or thankless tasks. But there was something different about the way she was treated at Brighton. This wasn't just about being overlooked, it was about being reduced. "You stacked the programs backward again," said Dr. Benjamin Carr, head of composition, one gray morning as he stood beside the faculty coffee cart. He didn't even wait for her response before walking off. Latte in hand, the programs were perfectly fine. He just needed someone to blame. Emma gave a soft nod and quietly restacked the papers, even though she had already double-checked them 3 times. The worst part wasn't the mistake, it was the assumption that she must have made one simply because of who she was, or who they thought she was. She had stopped trying to explain herself weeks ago. Each time she tried to offer a suggestion or gently correct an error, she was met with condescension or outright dismissal. Like that afternoon in room 112. Emma had just dropped off edited program notes for the upcoming scholarship recital when she noticed the open piano score on Dr. Blake's desk. Liszt's transcription of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. A difficult piece, even for the most advanced students. Is this what Lucas Thompson will be playing? She asked gently. Dr. Blake looked up, her expression sharp. Yes. Why? Emma hesitated, choosing her words carefully. It's just, the allegro is incredibly dense. Some of the passages may need more breathing room. Lucas tends to rush the left-hand arpeggios. He might benefit from. Dr. Blake raised her hand like a stop sign. Miss Callahan, she said curtly, you're a secretary, not a coach. Let's stick to what we're qualified for. Shall we? Emma swallowed her pride and lowered her gaze. Of course. I'm sorry. As she turned to leave, she caught a reflection of herself in the office window. A simple woman in flats and a cardigan. Not a pianist, not an artist, just Emma. She'd once played that exact piece, not just for a scholarship, but for a sold-out crowd at the Lincoln Center. The thunder of applause after her final chord had echoed in her memory for years. Now, she was dismissed for even mentioning it. There was a quiet cruelty to it, the kind that didn't come from shouting or insults, but from assumptions. From people who looked at her and saw nothing worth listening to. And still, she stayed, not because she enjoyed the silence, but because part of her hoped someone, anyone, might eventually see past the surface. But they didn't. Not Dr. Blake, not Dr. Carr, not even the students, who mirrored the coldness of the faculty. She was the woman who handed out sheet music, who brewed the coffee, who smiled politely and never raised her voice. The woman who knew how to repair a stuck sustain pedal but was never asked how she knew. Emma carried all of it, the silence, the dismissal, the fading identity, with a kind of quiet dignity that most would never understand. Because if she broke, if she let even one piece of truth slip, the walls she'd built to protect herself might come crumbling down. And the world wasn't ready to see her, not yet. But she was beginning to wonder if maybe, just maybe, she was ready to be seen again. If you're still listening to Emma's story, still hearing the unspoken pain and quiet strength in her silence, type the number 1 in the comments to let her know she's not invisible anymore. Sometimes, the ones we overlook are the ones with the deepest stories to tell. And Emma? Her story was just beginning. Part 3. When Everything Changed. The morning of the scholarship recital arrived with a strange kind of electricity in the air. Brighton's grand recital hall gleamed, polished to perfection for the donors and board members in attendance. Velvet chairs, gold railings, and stage lights warmed to a soft amber glow. For weeks, the faculty had spoken of nothing but Lucas Thompson, the conservatory's golden boy, and his performance of Liszt's notoriously difficult transcription of Beethoven's Fifth. Emma arrived earlier than usual, dressed in her nicest navy blue dress. Her braid was tighter, her shoes freshly cleaned. She carried the printed programs, triple-checked and flawless, and handed them off to Dr. Blake without a word. No thanks, no glance, just a snatch of the stack and a clipped. Put the extra copies backstage. She nodded and walked toward the green room, where the student performers waited. There, nerves buzzed like static. Some practiced fingerings in the air, others paced, silent and pale. Emma moved quietly, adjusting a music stand here, passing out bottled water there. She wasn't supposed to be involved, just assist. Stay useful, stay out of the way. Lucas sat in a corner, hunched over, hands trembling in his lap. Emma approached gently. Lucas, are you okay? He looked up with unfocused eyes, sweat beading at his temples. I can't feel my fingers. He whispered. Her heart dropped. Breathe with me. In for 4 counts, out for 8. He tried. His chest rose and fell unevenly. Is it pain? She asked softly. No, I don't think so. I can't go out there. Not like this. Not in front of them. Emma knelt beside him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. She had seen this before, the mind freezing the body, turning music into pressure, into fear. It had happened to her once, just before Vienna. Before the fall. Behind her, the door burst open. Dr. Blake stormed in, eyes scanning the room. Where is he? When she saw Lucas, her expression darkened. We're on in 10 minutes. Lucas couldn't even lift his head. What's wrong with him? She snapped. He's having a panic attack. Emma replied. We don't have time for this. The Danson Foundation is sitting front row. They're here to hear list. If we cancel now, there must be another student, said Dean Morgan, appearing behind her, someone who can step in. No one else has prepared this piece. It's too complex. Dr. Blake barked. Panic grew. The faculty argued in hissing tones. Emma stood back, invisible again, but this time, something inside her stirred. A quiet resolve, a forgotten fire. I can play it, she said, her voice calm, clear. They all turned. What did you just say? Dr. Blake asked, blinking. I know the list transcription. I've performed it before. Dean Morgan let out a short, stunned laugh. Miss Callahan, you're suggesting you go out there? In front of the Danson board? I am. This isn't a beginner's piece. Dr. Blake said, arms crossed. This is 14 minutes of some of the most complex piano ever written. Emma met her gaze steadily. I know. Do you even read music? I do. Have you trained? Dean Morgan demanded. Emma took a breath. Yes, at Juilliard. The silence that followed was heavy. Disbelief. Confusion. Then, desperation. There's no time to find anyone else. One faculty member muttered. Dr. Blake shook her head. If this goes badly, it won't. Emma interrupted, voice steady now. Dean Morgan turned to her. Face hard. You embarrass this school, and you're gone. Do you understand? I do. Professor Ridley handed her the score. Lips curled in disbelief. Here, at least pretend to look at the music. Emma smiled faintly. I won't need it. 30 seconds. The stage manager gestured from the wings. Dr. Blake turned toward the stage with a fixed smile, preparing to make the announcement. Emma stood alone behind the curtain, flexing her fingers slowly. For 5 years, those fingers hadn't touched a grand piano in front of an audience. Until now, the lights dimmed. The applause began politely as Dr. Blake introduced the unexpected performer. Emma stepped out. She took her seat at the piano, adjusted the bench with practiced ease, and for the first time in years, she didn't feel like an assistant. She felt like herself. She placed her hands on the keys, and with the first resounding chords of Beethoven through Liszt's vision, she reminded the world who she was. Part 4. When the music spoke for her. The moment Emma's fingers touched the keys, the room changed. The opening chords rang out, bold, thunderous, and impossibly precise. The kind of sound that didn't just fill the recital hall, it owned it. Conversations froze, eyebrows lifted, backs straightened in velvet seats. People leaned forward without realizing why. In the front row, the Danson Foundation's representatives, sharp suits and colder expectations, turned their heads toward the stage with narrowed eyes. They had come for a prodigy. What they were hearing was something else entirely. Up on stage, Emma was still, her shoulders relaxed, hands moving with a fluid grace that only decades of discipline could produce. She didn't glance at the audience. She didn't need to. The piano was hers, and for the first time in 5 years, she let it speak for her. The infamous passages, the swirling runs, the crushing octaves, the delicate inner voices hidden between layers of Beethoven and Liszt, came alive under her touch. She played them not just with technical mastery, but with understanding, with heart, with memory. By the time she reached the stormy second movement, there were no more whispers, only stunned silence. Dr. Blake, seated near the aisle, stared with her mouth slightly open. She hadn't blinked in over a minute. Her usual icy confidence melted into disbelief. Next to her, Dean Morgan had stopped taking notes. His pen hovered above the paper. Forgotten. Professor Ridley had leaned so far forward that his glasses slid down his nose. But he didn't push them back up. Backstage, Lucas stood silently in the wings, one hand pressed to his chest. watching the woman who had moments ago been fixing programs now command the entire hall. Who is she? They all wondered. And for Emma, it didn't matter. She wasn't playing for them. She was playing for the version of herself who once believed she was lost. For the years in recovery rooms and physical therapy clinics, trying to coax her damaged hands into remembering what once came so easily. For the stages she'd walked away from, and the silence that followed. For the little girl who once played Chopin with her eyes closed and believed music was magic. Now, she was the magic. The final crescendo built like a tidal wave, crashing over the audience with force and fire, and then, suddenly, she released it into silence. 3 beats passed. No one moved. Then, an eruption. The entire hall leapt to its feet. Applause thundered like the very chords she'd just unleashed. Some were clapping. Some were crying. Some, especially the older donors in the front rows, simply stood with tears in their eyes and hands trembling at their sides. Backstage, Lucas whispered under his breath. That was impossible. Out in the audience, a silver-haired man turned to his wife and whispered, "She's not an assistant. She's an artist." Dr. Blake remained seated, her face pale. Dean Morgan slowly placed his pen down, finally aware he had nothing left to write. Emma stood from the piano and bowed, simply, modestly. No dramatics, no ego, just gratitude. She didn't wave. She didn't speak. She just let the applause wash over her like a baptism. A reawakening. A return. And when she turned to exit the stage, her eyes met Lucas's in the wings. He was smiling, wide, real, and humbled. She smiled back. They both knew everything had changed. If your heart is still racing from the music Emma brought to life, if you felt something stir deep inside you, something beautiful, something brave, type the number 2 in the comments to let her know you're still listening. Because when someone finally finds their voice again, sometimes the only thing they need is for someone else to hear it. Part 5. A name remembered. The applause finally faded, but the hush that followed was heavier than before, not awkward silence, but reverent quiet. People weren't sure if they had just witnessed a performance or a resurrection. Dr. Blake stood slowly, forcing a smile onto her face as she stepped onto the stage. Her heels clicked across the polished wood, her hands clutching the microphone like it might save her from sinking. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, voice tighter than usual, due to an unforeseen circumstance. "Our original performer was unable to take the stage tonight." There were murmurs, half laughs. Everyone already knew that much. But, in his place, we were honored to witness an extraordinary performance. One that deserves explanation. She turned to Emma, the words sticking in her throat. "Miss Callahan, would you care to tell the audience who you really are?" Emma stepped forward, still calm, still composed, and looked out at the hundreds of faces watching her with awe, not pity. Not suspicion, just genuine curiosity. "My name," she said, "is Emma Callahan." Another pause. "But some of you may know me by another name. Before the accident, before I stepped away from the stage, I was Emma Callahan Worth." A collective gasp rippled through the room. That name hadn't been spoken in the classical world in years, not since the once revered pianist had vanished after a traumatic hand injury. Her story was part mystery, part legend. Some said she'd retired, others whispered of a breakdown. But none had expected this. Dean Morgan stood, stunned. "Emma Worth? You're that Emma Worth?" Emma gave a small, humble smile. "Yes, I was. And I suppose, I still am." The Danson Foundation's director stood slowly from the front row. "Ms. Worth, we came here today searching for the future of classical music, and found its beating heart." The applause reignited, but Emma held up a hand. "Thank you," she said gently. "But I didn't return to reclaim a title. I came here to rediscover why I ever played in the first place." Her eyes swept the room. "For 5 years, I questioned whether I had anything left to offer. I thought if I could just disappear, maybe the world wouldn't notice how far I'd fallen. But this place, your students, your music, your silence, it reminded me that sometimes, when we step out of the spotlight, we finally hear the music we've been missing all along." She turned to Lucas, still standing in the wings. "And maybe, we realize it's not about the stage anymore. It's about passing something on." Madam Prescott, the school's oldest vocal instructor, walked on stage and embraced Emma gently. "We should have seen you," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." Emma nodded. "You didn't know what to look for. That's okay." In the days that followed, Brighton School of Music changed. Dr. Blake, once the gatekeeper of standards, now sat quietly during faculty meetings, listening more than speaking. Dean Morgan offered Emma a formal position, not as an assistant, but as artist in residence with her own masterclass series. Students who had never spoken to her now lined up outside her new office with sheet music and questions. But Emma wasn't chasing fame anymore. She was chasing meaning. She taught the way no one had ever taught her, with empathy, not intimidation. She didn't lecture, she listened. She helped students not just perfect their technique, but understand the heart behind the notes. And they responded. Lucas, now her most eager student, practiced longer, deeper, under her guidance. He found his confidence again, and more importantly, his joy. 1 month later, Emma sat alone in her office, morning light slanting across the polished black surface of a baby grand. On the door, a new plaque, Emma Callahan Worth, artist in residence. She ran her fingers gently across the keys. Not to practice, just to remember. Not all healing happens in silence. Sometimes, healing begins when we allow ourselves to be heard again. She closed her eyes, letting the quiet settle around her like a second skin. No spotlights, no stage fright, just music, just peace. Sometimes, we lose ourselves to the world's expectations. But when we begin again, not for applause, but for meaning, we discover a version of ourselves that's even stronger than before. If Emma's journey touched your heart, if you've ever hidden your gifts, your pain, or your truth, then know this: you are not alone, and you are not forgotten. There's something powerful about a person who carries greatness in silence. Emma wasn't loud. She didn't fight for attention. She didn't wave a banner announcing her past. She simply showed up, every day, doing the work no one applauded, in a world that had long forgotten who she was. And yet, when the moment came, when the world needed her, she stood up. Not for recognition, not for revenge, but because she remembered who she was, and who she still could be. That's the lesson we often overlook. Your value isn't measured by who notices you. It's revealed when you choose to show up fully, even when no one's looking. Maybe you've been in a place like Emma, underestimated, overlooked, or dismissed. Maybe you've hidden a piece of your story because the world told you it wasn't worth sharing. But here's the truth: you matter. Your gifts still have power. And it's never too late to begin again. Let Emma's story remind us. The quietest people often carry the loudest truths. The ones in the background may be the ones holding everything together. So if this story moved you, if you felt seen, heard, or understood, let us know. Type a comment below sharing what part of Emma's journey spoke to you most. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next story that might change the way you see the world, or yourself. Because here on this channel, we believe that behind every quiet life is an extraordinary story just waiting to be told. And maybe yours is next.